loved to party. And he always said that when the time came, he wanted a wake and not a somber service. So the formalities today are going to be really short, and we encourage you to check out the photos that are around the room, and swap stories, have a good time, and share some good laughs. There's also a guest book just as we come in there with room to share funny stories, memories, that kind of thing. And I know Mom will cherish those over the years to come. So please take some time and think about that. So to kick things off and maybe stir up some of those memories, David Letourneau, Jim's eldest grandson, Dr. Brian Dunham, his long-term medical practice partner and colleague, and longtime friend, Dr. Joe Fairbanks, will also come up and share some stories. After we finish that, we'll turn the mic off and encourage you to stick around and have some time. And with that, I'll introduce David.
Thanks. All right, thanks, Mom. And thank you, everybody, for coming. It's tough. I'd like to remind anybody here who's going to get emotional that this is supposed to be a party, so there's no crying. And I can see some tears out there. It's not up here. Jim had a great life, and he would love a celebration. And I know if you were here right now, Lois would be saying, Jim, Jim, Jim. And he'd be in some debate, having an argument. And I know he's here in full spirit, and we love him. So, as Mom mentioned, I'm Dave, the eldest grandson, and I want to give a little background on Pops. So James Archer Clapperton, born in Ontario, 1938, and throughout his life he'd go by many names. He went by James, he went by Jim, he went by Jim, he went by Dad, he went by Doc, Clap, Papa, or Pops, right? A lot of nicknames. What else?
Clapperman.
Clapperman. So, he grew up, he played hockey, he was a wrestler, he boxed, he loved competing at pretty much everything he could. In later years, he was famous at family gatherings, or maybe more infamous for his arm wrestling challenges. I think he's probably arm wrestled everybody here, and I don't know, I never saw him lose, and this is like in his 60s, right? He would be beating all of us. So that was just years of growing up on the farm and baling hail and hailing whatever.
How long have you been in the States?
Obviously, city slickers. Grandkids are soft city slickers. So, after high school, Jim went to Western Ontario Medical School, and he ultimately graduated at the top of his class, near the top of his class. He was known for his intellect. We'll get to that a little bit later. But he's also known for his boisterous nature, which I think a lot of us has probably seen. And I heard some pretty funny stories actually earlier today that we won't talk about. But I got this one story that was told by many of his classmates that I thought was pretty funny. I want to share. It said, during football season, it was my job to get the stadium early and cordon off seats for all of our friends. It was Jim's job to bring the beer. Each and every Saturday, Jim would scale the back of the stadium, bringing with him dozens of cold beers for the rest of us to enjoy. According to his friends, Clap was never seen going through the front gates, and he never paid for a ticket. So I thought it was pretty cool, and his mom said he loved to party. But it was around this time when Jim met Lois, and the love of his life. And I think Lois was perfect for Jim, right? She would steady him and challenge him in the best possible ways. Lois was talking to me last night. She said that all her friends would call. Sorry, this is weird. It's like a fly or something. But her friends would say, Jim was a wild one, and you're the only one who could tame him. And I was reflecting on that, and I don't think she ever succeeded in taming him. but I would say that she succeeded in humbling him anytime they played golf, bridge, or cards. And some of my fondest memories are coming to their house, and we had an adjoined house as a kid growing up. I was so lucky to live with them. And you'd walk in the morning and there would be visible tension in the air because they had just finished their morning Scrabble game. And Jim had probably lost, and he was disputing something, and you could actually feel it, right? They were very competitive. He went so far as to memorize all the 2-letter words, and he was the first to challenge any of these longer, more complex words that Lois would use. I think you still have the winning record on that one, Grams. So in 1963, Lois and Jim boarded a plane to Edmonton with a 10-day-old Laura. I think it's crazy, you know, they had no family here, no friends, no connection really to speak of, but they were starting a new adventure in Western Canada. It was here where they would build a home, a family, make countless great friends, thank you all for coming, and operate a pretty successful medical practice, right? I'm looking forward to hearing about more of that later. I think being a doctor was core to Jim's identity, right? Over the course of his career, amazing. He delivered babies, performed surgeries, he was a family physician, an ER attending, he ran a sports medicine clinic, and he was even at the local coroner's office, right? He was a full cycle MD. As my Uncle Andrew said, Papa practically delivered half of olds. It's pretty funny. He was known as an excellent diagnostician and an extremely compassionate doctor. And over the past few months, I think Grandma has received countless kind words from colleagues who remember him as someone who treated everyone with deep respect and kindness and compassion. It wouldn't surprise me, and I actually think it's a fact, that probably everybody in this room has received some kind of medical advice from Pops and helped them out in some way. What's that?
Is it solicited or not?
Solicited or not, that's a good point. I think one of the reasons he was such an excellent physician was he had this ironclad memory, right? He could recall facts and people, both of which were very important to him. There's an incredible story about when he and Grandma were in Edinburgh. This would be then probably in their 60s. They were walking on the street together, and when he looked up and said, "I know that man," and Grandma didn't know who that person was. I guess he walked over and introduced himself and said, "Hi, my name's Jim Clapperton. Do you remember me? We went to kindergarten together." So that's kind of the guy he was, right? He had this amazing memory and intellect, right? Another great story is when his daughter Laura was applying to law school, and what after I assume was a few drinks, he proclaimed, "I could pass the LSAT too." Grandma brushed off and basically said, "Yeah, go have fun, Jim." And sure enough, 50 years of age, he wrote the LSAT for fun and passed. Not as well as Laura, for the record. I think another quality of his, he was extremely observant, right? He could look at you and he could sort of see what was going on, which I think probably saved countless lives. I've got a few interesting anecdotes I want to share with everybody. One is actually when he was in retirement, out for dinner with a family accountant, and they're at a nice restaurant, and Jim sort of said, "You don't look well. Like I think you should go to the hospital. You just don't look right." Right? He's very observant, and there was some pushback. They were at a nice restaurant, but sure enough, they decided to go to the ED that night, and it was the fact that if they'd slept the night and not gone in, that person would have passed away, right? And he did that over and over and over again. I don't think he paid for his tax preparation after that night. I don't think it was unusual. There's a couple other stories, and one of them was actually submitted on his memorial page from somebody who was a stranger, so not known to Pops. She said, "I felt rather foolish coming in, but Dr. Clapperton didn't brush me off. When an intern wanted to send us home, Dr. Clapperton insisted that our son was properly checked out. Soon thereafter, a malignant brain tumor was discovered in my son. We remember Dr. Clapperton for his compassion and quick response to our crisis. I'm forever grateful to have had him as our doctor. So you'd think that life as a medical professional would sort of harden somebody or make them withdraw from life, but I think that was the exact opposite for Jim. He was the first to talk about mortality. He would offer dire warnings to his children about the risks of doing certain things, you know, such as maybe putting your fingers in the socket of what is it? They don't even have those anymore.
It's a lighter.
A lighter socket, right?
In car.
So he kind of doomsday scenario, but it didn't affect him in his life, right? I think he was very much aware of the fragility and fleeting nature of life. So there, he was the first to say yes to a party. He was the first to say yes to a social engagement or a trip. One of the most memorable trips is when they went to Moscow in 1972 at the height of the Cold War. I guess Jim came home one day and he said, "Lois, we're going to go to Moscow to watch the Summit Series. Let's go get some tickets and go." And so they went. Within weeks, I think, right, Grandma? It was just very spontaneous. You know, at the time, nobody went there, right? So it's the kind of thing he did regularly. In addition to, you know, Moscow, he went to places like Caracas, Kenya, Osaka, Singapore, and Austria, usually accompanying a Canadian sports team. One of his proudest achievements was when he became president of the Canadian Sports Medicine Association. He was the sports medicine doctor for the Pan Am Games and for the World University Games. He was very, very proud of that, and really brought together his two biggest passions, right? I mean, medicine and sport, right? This was like water. When Pops wasn't traveling, right, he was finding adventure other ways. He loved to hike, camp, fish, ski, golf, and play racket sports. I think some of his most iconic memories would have been in the Kern Valley Ranchers, snowmobiling or tobogganing at Bears Paw, or golfing in Mexico. I very much look forward to hearing about those memories for you all today and sharing those stories. With that, I'd like to wrap this up with a toast to my grandfather Jim. He was a kind, compassionate man who cared deeply about everybody he met. He loved life and wasn't afraid to live it on his terms.
Created a space for me in his office in the Stadium Shopping Center, along with Bob Forsyth, and under the sign Medical Clinic, which I'll refer to later. We've known each other, can you believe it, for half a century. He was a good mentor for me and a teacher, as well as an astute physician. He'd worked previously in Olds, and by coming to Calgary, broadened his scope by working in the ER, working at the University of Calgary clinics, and as well working at University Health Services, all the while running the office in Stadium. His patients truly respected him, and he gave them great, no-nonsense professional care. He was a consistent worker with good judgment and a friend that I could call on. I could call on for advice, and I did that on many occasions. I was always impressed with his focus on Lois and the children. He told me about the achievements of Laura and the boys and the grandchildren many times. He was confident and could stand as ground with anyone, while at the same time he would instill confidence in those he associated with. And he certainly had an eye for disease, and as David mentioned, he spotted illness in other people, even in other physicians, and that is a special talent. One day he had been visiting a doctor who'd been admitted to a medical unit at the Foothills, and I was surprised when he said to me, you know, doctors stay clear of their colleagues when they're ill. And I knew that this was the norm, but not Jim Clapperton. He was there for his colleagues only as only a true friend would be. My only wish is that I could have been there with him in Sydney to have given him support in the last while. He enjoyed life, and he had many different pursuits. In the 1970s, he served with the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Alberta, and then he worked with the chief coroner of the province, who was John Butts, as an ME, a medical examiner with the coroner's office. And I think that they may have butted heads a time or two. So here's the thing I wanted to tell you about, is because he worked for the coroner, he had a placard for his car, and it was Attorney General's office, official business. So he could park anywhere. And so I thought, you know, this would be good for me. I could park right in the front door of the Foothills. And I worked and worked him to get a copy of that, or to get that off of him, and I never succeeded. So he was always good to get along with, almost. On one occasion, I heard that his nurse, Lois, apparently may have walked out and left him in the office on his own. Mind you, I don't know any more details. So my next comments I have under the acronym FAWC. That's Fun Adventures with Clapperton. So first of all, when he returned from climbing Mount Kenya, the first day he was back on a Monday, I went into his office hoping that he was, you know, here and home to do work. And but when I went back there, here I found Jim on his iPhone and talking to his travel agent. And do you remember Jim's version of the iPhone? I got it here. You know, that was his beloved daytimer. You remember that? So there's Jim on the phone talking to his travel agent, first day back, and booking San Francisco or something. So I walk back there and I go, like, what the H, what are you doing? And that's when he told me about the Tarzan plan. And that's when you swing home, then you have to get ready and book your next trip that you can swing out on. And he said, you know, that will save your marriage. What a gem of a guy he had with us. So the next adventure that we had, I don't know why we were doing this, but we were together and we drove down 17th Avenue southwest. And it was May 1979, and beautiful sunny day. And Jim looked over and said, well, there's a house for sale there. I think we should just buy it. So, okay. So we stopped and got the realtor's number and the information on this house. And believe it or not, we drove a little further and Jim said, well, the CIBC there has loans for sale. And we should go in and get a loan. So we both went in and we both got loans, bank loans, and we bought the 17th Avenue property. And I haven't a clue how we made out on it, but believe it or not, I have a box in my closet. I just saw 17th Avenue property. That's why I know May 1979. So I think David said, you know, the guy was spontaneous, right? Yeah, I think we both borrowed $50,000. Anyway, the next adventure was just a year later or so, in 1980, you know, Trudeau passed the National Energy Policy. And I think Abacus Cities built the Foothills Professional Building across the street. And Jim said to me one day, you know that first floor over there is empty and vacant. And he said, you go over and make them an offer, and maybe we can move over there. And we're probably paying $15 a foot. And I said, well, how much should I offer them? He said, 50 cents. Only Jim, eh? So, well, they didn't take that offer that I gave them, but we got the space for $3 a foot, and we had it until the Petrochem, till their lease ran out. So we had a nice rental holiday thanks to Jim. So later on, one night, we moved over to that office, and when we were done, Jim decided that that sign I referred to on the stadium should come down, you know, so people weren't confused that the medical clinic was still there. So it was about midnight, and us two doctors went over there. The sign was probably 2.5 feet by 12, very heavy. So I'm up the ladder, and Jim's pulling on the sign with a rope. And I pulled out a bolt, and the sign crashed down 1 millimeter from his face. And so that was a misadventure. Anyway, I told him it was his fault for pulling so hard on the rope. And I don't know if he was ever convinced about that. So this is just a snapshot of Jim's career and our being friends together. And it's my privilege to have known Jim Clapperton for this half century. This is a man who has been my friend a doctor, a husband, a father, an athlete, a sports medicine man, an ER doc, an ME, a Royal College advisor, a real estate tycoon, a mentor, and just an all-around great guy. And we will remember and miss our dear colleague. Thank you.
You did hit the nail on the head in a lot of those points, and Dad did the same thing with the house that we ended up living in. That sort of impulsive, let's go buy that house. So I can totally relate to that. Now I'd just like to introduce Joe Fairbanks, a longtime friend of Dad's, and hand it off to you, Joe.
Well, this is just going to be a few Jim stories, and I'm sure there's a lot more out there. It was 9:30 at night. The party had already started. We were in the men's doubles of the tennis Labor Day weekend tournament. we had drawn these fellas that were the pretty top seeds, and we didn't have a chance of beating them. So I said to Jim, well, maybe we should just go to the party. Look, one of those guys might trip and break their ankle. We're going to play. And that's the competitive spirit that Jim had. He applied it to his sports. Now, on the golf course, when he was in the club championship, trying to win his flight, you could see him compete like mad. And then on the 16th hole of the Forest, when he got his eagle, playing against Don Gladman, he was happy. He was competitive if you played ping pong with him. Yeah. He was competitive in hockey. Now, even though he was competitive, he knew about a coveted and rather elusive prize, namely to get your name on the champions board at the Glencoe Club in the hallway. Well, believe it or not, Jim's name is there. And you won't know why, but you can make a guess. Anybody want to make a guess? Bowling! Okay. Now, hockey. For the doctors playing the interns, Jim would stick handle through the whole team or throw a hip check as if he was Bobby Orr. He loved it. And I'm going to intrude on David's story, but Don Gladman and Jim were going to go to Moscow to watch the Canada-Russia series in 1972. At the last minute, Don couldn't go. So Jim told Lois, we're gonna go to Moscow. And Lois said, well, we don't have any money. And Jim said, well, you have that Eaton's credit card. And that worked. And you know what? They got to see Paul Henderson score that goal to win the series. A wonderful moment for you.
It was a Canadian moment.
Wonderful Canadian moment. Now, early on, Jim and Lois went skiing to Mount Norquay. Lois had never skied before, but they got on the chair. And I hope it wasn't the Lone Pine, but Lois said, well, how do you turn? Jim said, well, you played hockey. You just turn your skis the way you turn your skates. Well, how do you stop? Well, you just turn your skis sideways, the same as when you're skating. Well, Jim thought that Lois could do anything. And he was right. They were good skiers, and Evelyn and I had some wonderful ski trips with them. Now, Jim liked to go to parties, Grey Cup parties, brandings, and Halloween costume parties. Lois and Jim put on a Halloween dinner. Lois was the chef.
Always.
And Jim was the waiter. You had to order your food from the menu. And the menu consisted of a whole lot of Halloween words. There was no food on it. I'm going to read you a few of them. Pumpkin, full moon, witch's broom, ghost juice, red carry-on, devil's blood, black cat, trick or treat. Now, Tudor Williams ordered pumpkin and a full moon, a witch's broom, and ghost juice. With great glee, Jim served him his meal. It consisted of a piece of apple pie, a piece of squash, a toothpick, which represented the witch's broom, and some white wine. The second course was a delightful roast beef dinner. But Tudor, he had deciphered the code, and he knew that devil's blood was red wine, and he ordered that for the rest of the evening. Now, Jim sure liked to play sports, and he loved fun and games, but you knew that he was, underneath it all, a doctor. Now, working beside Jim, alongside him, at the Foothills Hospital, from the time it opened, you could tell that Jim knew his medicine, he loved his medicine, and he lived his medicine. You could say a little bit that, I'm going to divert a bit, but he was like Charles Russell, that cowboy, painter, and philosopher. They said that he was a fun guy to be around, and that he was what they called good medicine. Well, Jim was good medicine. Good medicine for his patients, good medicine for his friends, good medicine for his family, and good medicine for your heart and soul. He was fun to be around.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. That was really great, and I hope it sort of sparked some memories that were sort of along the same lines, and different kinds of stories that probably lined up with Dad's character in the same ways that what you heard from Brian and Joe and David, and I really hope that you take some time. We've got some food set out over here. The bar is still open, and hope you continue to spend some time having fun. Sorry? Oh, and looking at the posters, which I mentioned earlier. But before we move on, I'll just, one final toast to Dad. Just really grateful that we all got to have him in our lives. I think we were all enriched by sharing in all of his adventures. And thank you all so much for coming. You meant a lot to him, and you're a big part of his life. So thanks. Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers.